If you run a development agency, your highest hidden cost is repetition. You continually rebuild the same logic for different clients, starting from scratch each time a contract is signed. You assign senior developers to wire up Firebase authentication or build a custom Stripe integration for a client's specific dashboard. It takes weeks of billing. The client is happy, and the project ships. Then the next client walks in, and your team writes those same integrations all over again. This repetition creates massive amounts of glue code, custom logic written solely to force different libraries and components to talk to each other. It burns through billable hours and traps your team in maintenance cycles without building any reusable equity into your own codebase. Xuda approaches this problem with a highly opinionated plugin ecosystem. Instead of writing custom glue code for every project, their system asks developers to build a feature exactly once inside their rigid parameters, so it can be deployed instantly across any app on their platform. This comparison table breaks down the financial math between these two approaches. On the left, the traditional model requires high developer hours for every project. You charge a healthy one-time client fee, but that revenue stream is capped by the number of hours your team can physically work. On the right, the Xuda model introduces new variables. You pay for their agency plan and still invest initial developer hours. But because the resulting code is packaged as a universal plugin, you can collect your client fee and then sell that same module in Xuda's marketplace, earning recurring payouts every time another developer installs it. That specific mechanism turns your code from a localized cost center, something you maintain strictly for one client, into a scalable product that generates revenue on its own. Accessing this marketplace requires two commitments: purchasing Xuda's top-tier agency plan and writing your code to strictly conform to their proprietary architecture. This leaves agency owners with a clear dilemma. Is the passive revenue potential of a global marketplace worth the total architectural lock-in required to participate? To understand the cost of that lock-in, you have to look at the rules Xuda forces developers to follow. You cannot write open-ended scripts and link them up however you prefer. First, every custom tool you build is forced into a strict naming convention. All code must live permanently under the @xuda.io namespace, explicitly tying your work to their platform. This diagram maps out the 6 strict quadrants where your code is allowed to exist. Xuda categorizes every plugin as either a database driver, a front-end framework, graphics, a logic library, a UI helper, or a full graphical widget. There is no middle ground. Every line of code you write must be neatly classified as an input component, a data driver, or a background logic block. The benefit of this rigidity is absolute predictability. Because your plugin fits perfectly into one of these 6 boxes, the Studio Visual Editor knows exactly where to surface it. UI elements appear in the Layout panel, and logic libraries automatically show up in the Workflow Builder, all without manual configuration. The trade-off is that your developers completely lose the ability to design hybrid architectural patterns. If you need a custom tool that straddles the line between a database driver and a front-end widget, Xuda's structure simply won't accommodate it. That structural rigidity isn't an oversight. It is the deliberate mechanism that guarantees every plugin will universally compose with any other tool in the ecosystem. That composability is tested immediately when plugins need to rely on each other in a real-world production application. This flowchart traces how Xuda validates complex interactions. When a plugin attempts to install, the system reads its dependent plugin ID to check if it requires a parent framework, and cross-references an authorized plugins list to ensure the child is approved. If you build a sophisticated Stripe UI widget, you can declare that it specifically depends on the Stripe core logic library to function. If a user tries to install your UI widget without the core logic library, the platform halts the process. It will outright refuse to install broken chains or unapproved extensions. To ensure all of this works flawlessly before distribution, developers are required to build and test these tools inside Xuda's Monaco Editor sandbox. Code authored here is bundled directly into the application's native build process. When the app compiles, the runtime picks up your plugin automatically, completely bypassing the need for external loading scripts. The trade-off for this workflow is steep for veteran developers. You achieve incredibly fast internal iteration, but you have to completely abandon your preferred local IDE and personal terminal setups. Xuda guarantees runtime stability and flawless dependency management across complex applications, but the cost is surrendering to a development cycle entirely enclosed within their walled garden. If you accept the constraints of the sandbox, the conversation moves to the financial payoff of distribution. This diagram maps the distribution pipeline for a finished plugin. From the sandbox, your tool can either be reserved for internal use across your client portfolio or pushed to the open marketplace. To list a plugin on the public marketplace, you need an active agency plan subscription and a configured Stripe Connect account. With that setup, any user on the platform can install your tool with one click. Xuda processes the payment, splits the revenue, and routes the payout directly to your connected account. You gain an immediate passive revenue stream without spinning up a single piece of billing or distribution infrastructure. In exchange, you give up platform fees and tie your earning potential to Xuda's active user base. The marketplace is the specific payoff that justifies the entire system. It takes the tedious, forced dependency management you performed in the sandbox and turns it into a liquid financial asset. Looking back at the whole system, these technical constraints exist to serve the financial marketplace. Every rigid requirement in the sandbox ensures that when a plugin is sold, it works on the first click without manual debugging. This scorecard reveals the 4 tests for a positive return on investment. First, your agency processes repetitive client bills. Second, you want passive revenue from plugins. Third, you accept strict framework lock-in. And finally, you have the budget for the agency tier. Digital agencies and independent software vendors who build complex, reusable widgets easily hit all 4 of these criteria. For them, this ecosystem is a perfect match.